All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started because we have a quorum at this point. So I'll call to order the February meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors. Hopefully some of our colleagues are on their way. We had decided we wanted to meet on Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day, and staff brought in some special cookies for us. So enjoy, and thank you, staff, for making changes potentially to your evening plans to be with us, and appreciate your loved ones' understanding of that. I'll ask our secretary to call the roll.
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist.
Here.
Kendall Taylor. Matt Harris.
Here.
Hillary Orr. Jasha Thomas. Jesse O'Connell.
Here.
Arthur Wicks.
Here.
Chair Kaplan, you have a quorum.
Thank
Those
you.
absent are Kendall Taylor and Jasha Thomas.
All right, thank you. And Matt has an excused absence from being with us in person. Thank you for joining us remotely, Matt. We hope you're feeling better. We'll go ahead and start. And I should note, I sent an email to all of you, and but not everybody in the room may be aware that Murat Ome has resigned from the board. We're expecting Murat to join us a little bit later tonight so we can recognize him for his service and thank him for his time on the board. Do we have any speakers for public comment?
Yes, we have Bob Cronenberg.
Well, Bob, I'm going to read the statement because I haven't read it in a while. So I'll, in case. Oh, okay. And in case we have anybody online who wants to speak, who's unfamiliar with our procedures. So here we go. We are about to convene into the public comment period of our meeting. All dashboard meetings include a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting, as we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our riders and community members. The board is here to listen. However, please keep in mind that public comment is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns or questions tonight. We take any concerns and questions seriously and need sufficient time to process and research any issues if need be. Board members will respond to your questions and concerns at a future meeting or have the proper staff member get back to you at the appropriate time. Please note that personnel matters are not a part of the public comment period. However, please know that we take any personnel questions seriously. You are asked to contact Dash administration with any such concerns. We ask that all speakers and members of the audience maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. Further, we ask that speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than the audience. The board will take pre-registered speakers first, and then I will invite others who wish to speak who may not have pre-registered. For future meetings, you may pre-register on the website dashbus.com on the Board of Directors page. I will now call the first speaker. Please remember each individual speaker is allotted 3 minutes for your comments. If you are speaking on behalf of a neighborhood civic association or unit owners association, please identify yourself accordingly to be recognized for 5 minutes. And I'll go ahead and recognize Bob Grunenberg. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was at the meeting last month at City Hall, and I listened intently to the excellent presentation on the strategic plan. And I applaud the board and Dash for that initiative and for setting goals for frequent, convenient, and dependable service. In fact, the Dash difference chart I made a copy of because I was so impressed by that. But there's one glaring omission in the plan, in my opinion, and that is connections. Not all of us can go from point A to point B or from point A to go home with one bus. And I was at the stakeholders workshop for Transit Vision Plan, which extolled the virtues of transferring buses. Like airlines have hub and spoke, it was considered advantageous to change buses. But the unspoken truth is that connections only work effectively when they're reasonably timed. When you have buses running less frequently, particularly in the evening on fluctuating headways, untimed connections just don't work. For example, the 31 runs every 10 minutes during the late afternoon, then it steps down to every 20 minutes, and then it's on a 30-minute headway after about 7:30 or so, or 8 o'clock. The 36A, which I changed to from the 31, runs on a 30-minute headway during the daytime and in the evening on a 60-minute headway. And there is no coordination between the two in terms of connections. The case in point, at the November board meeting, which was at City Hall, my trip home to Park Fairfax took 75 minutes. That's for a 3.6 mile trip. That's about the speed I would walk the distance. And it used to take 20 minutes with a one-seat ride. But now I have to change once or twice, depending on which service I catch. Some years ago, San Francisco trialed a timed connection program for their late evening service where buses ran every half hour. And if you, at some major intersections like Market and Van Ness, the
30
buses would
seconds remaining.
stop at the same time, and they'd wait for the buses in all directions before the buses would depart, so the passengers would have a safe and convenient transfer. I realize that's difficult, much easier said than done as far as dash buses are concerned with all the different transfer locations. And timing connections with Metro bus is nearly impossible. But I would stress again that
Your time is up. Please finish your comments.
connections are critical to having a successful trip. The next time I have to go to City Hall in the evening, I'll have to drive my car.
Bob, can I ask you one question? The 75 minutes, does that include when you left our meeting to wait for the first bus, or is that from when you boarded the 31 to when you walked in your?
It's a little convoluted story because I was planning to take the bus, the OTC to Braddock Road, the opposite direction to get to 104.
Mhm.
The OTC was late, and therefore I knew I missed the last 104.
Hmm.
So I went across the street and just missed the 31 on the other
Wow.
side. And finally got a 30, had to change it, Peter Street back to 31, and then again at Bradley. And it was fun.
Thank you, Bob. And we'll be talking tonight about the strategic plan further, and I'll be asking staff about the public outreach process. But I know Martin is capturing your comments, and we'll be taking that into consideration as we shape the plan. So thank you. Are there any other speakers? We have no online speakers pre-registered.
We do.
Oh, we do.
Dan Green registered.
Mr. Green, we will unmute you so you can be recognized for 3 minutes. Mr. Green, you appear to be, you were unmuted just a moment ago.
He's rejoining.
Oh, okay.
Mute. Here, that should be good. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Mr. Green.
All right, just a brief comment here. As a Metro rider and a Dash rider here for 40 years, I've grown a little bit concerned over the last couple of years, actually since COVID. Really loved Dash for many years, still do. At least I hope I do. Currently, there's been ongoing discussions, I know, for Metro to increase fares or to reduce services and things like that. We've seen some reduced services of Dash over the last couple of years, especially after we went to a no fare system. And so I saw the strategic plan last month, which was also very interesting, but I don't recall any discussion about fares. It does seem to me that by the fact that we don't have fares on our bus, we are actually losing some capital as many of our federal government workers and many of our downtown DC workers actually have subsidized transportation. If we are refusing that source of funds, it seems like our bus service might not be as good as it can be. We've noticed additional trash on the bus. Housekeeping is not as good and refined. I've talked to bus drivers. Many of them are outstanding and have been with us for many, many years. And they have absolutely no understanding why there is not a minimum fare, $1, a very minimal fare, not onerous, not what the actual cost is, not a full cost refund or cost reimbursable. We understand that, but is there a plan? How long can we go without a fare? Basically, it seems like an indefinite process right now, and nobody else in our community in the metro area is following this. So, and that's it. Thank you very much for the time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Green. Are there any speakers in the room who would like to be recognized? Are there any speakers online who would like to be recognized? Please use the raise hand feature, and we'll pause for a moment to see if anybody seeks recognition.
Mr. Chair, I don't see any hands going up.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment. The next item is consideration of the meeting minutes from January 10th that were included in our board packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes as they were submitted? If not, is there a motion to adopt them?
So moved.
Moved by Jesse. Is there a second? Steve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Jaysha abstains. All right, we'll move into the chair's report. I reported at the very top of the meeting that Murat Ome has resigned from the board, as I think all the board members are aware of. Murat is expected to join us, so we can recognize him, but he is not here yet. So we will, if he joins us, we'll take that kind of out of order. I am also going to let you know that our stockholders meeting has been scheduled for March 12th. This is our opportunity before City Council where they have to take up business items related to the ongoing operation of Alexandria Transit Company as a corporate entity. And so we some years get the 1 hour version of the stockholders meeting, and this is a 15-minute year version of the stockholder meeting, just given what is going on in the city in terms of other pressing items, especially on the budget. It is scheduled to start at 7 p.m., which I believe is sort of after an executive session that the city, we're not the first item on the agenda. So they will come out of executive session and then meet with us in the council chambers. I always encourage attendance by board members at the stockholder meeting because I think it's very important to hear what our stockholders have to say. There won't be a lot of time for discussion just because we have business items to run through that will probably take up at least half of the 15 minutes. But we've prepared Josh and staff have prepared a summary presentation, and we'll also try to provide just a little bit of highlights on what we're doing related to the bus stop improvement program and the inventory. So if you're able to attend in person, I certainly would welcome you in the chambers with us. But if you're able to join on Zoom, I think that's fine as well because it's going to be a less substantive year. We are finalizing the slate of directors. We'll be taking up nominations for additional directors to join us, but assuming that all of you are included on the slate and all of you wish to continue serving. If that is not the case, tonight is the night to let us know because it's going up to the stockholders otherwise. I think that's, I do have one other thing. We're going to do an icebreaker probably in April because I want to explain it to our new board members so that they can participate in March. But basically, it's going to be a little bit of competition to look at who used transit the most in 2023 because WMATA allows you with your Smart Trip cards to basically pull a report on your utilization. I saw the mayor did it and posted it on his social media. And so I went and pulled mine as a result of it. And so I'm just going to encourage us to share a couple of pieces of data. One is it tells you what percentile of all Smart Trip card users you're in based on your rides during the year. So we'll share that. We'll see if anybody leads the mayor in terms of usage of transit. And then we can also look at two other measures, which is most frequent bus route you used, which wouldn't include Dash since we don't swipe our Smart Trip cards, but the most frequent Metro bus route that you used during the prior year, if you're willing to share that. And then also how many Metro rail stations you visited during the last year, either swiping in or swiping out. So we'll provide information after the March meeting as to how you can pull your report. I hope everybody will be willing to participate and it'll just be kind of a fun competition. Maybe there'll be some cookies for the winner. I'll see. I also, and I haven't talked to Josh about this, but maybe our department heads who attend our meeting might also want to have a separate staff category as well and share. So that's optional, but something that'd be fun just for all of us to kind of see who rides transit the most. Again, no bearing on your future as a board member, just a fun thing to kind of get to know who we'll see on rail and bus most often. So that's all I have for my report. I'll turn it over to Hillary for TNS.
Mr. Chair, my only objection to that is the fact that I've already heard from a council member or two about how can we possibly do this for Dash?
Well, yeah.
And I said, I would love to, but that's not possible. So we can talk though about the fact that Dash is moving more people than it's ever moved in its history, and
Yes.
that's a lot of single occupancy vehicles.
Well, and
off the
I
road,
think I
so-
would have been in the 99th percentile if my Dash rides were included. Because actually I looked at my most frequent Metro bus route and I was thinking maybe I rode it 5 times last year, but because I'm mostly moving on Dash, but it'll be just a kind of a fun exercise, and I hope that folks will appreciate the spirit of it. And we can talk more about Josh if you want to have your open it up to some of your staff as well. I know I sprang that on you kind of last minute. Hillary.
Members of the board. I have a few updates for you all tonight. The first thing I want to talk about is our King and Bradley project. We have a community meeting tomorrow night, and this is a project where we are looking at King Street, kind of in front of the Bradley Shopping Center, which is also a Dash route. We did initial outreach this fall and had an online feedback form, and we had pop-ups at the shopping center. We had bus stop chats, and we spoke, had over 800 interactions from the community. So we'll kind of go over the summary of what we heard and how that led into the concepts that we're going to share with the community for that roadway, and get feedback and talk to the community at this meeting. And then everything will be posted online, presentation will be recorded, slides are posted, and then there's an online feedback form for people to provide input on the different design options that we're looking at.
Question on that, Hillary?
Yes.
Is King Braddock Quaker intersection a part of that project?
No, it is not. That is a tricky intersection, and we needed to focus on the roadway. So yes, we are leaving that out of this particular process, but we recognize that that could function better. The second update I have is on the WMATA budget. This was not in your packet. I needed to get some information after the packet was due. And on February 8th, the WMATA board released a revised FY25 operating and capital budget. So the last budget that came out in December was pretty harsh and had a lot of cuts to rail and bus service. This new budget avoids most of those, with only small changes to peak hour windows and weekend frequencies on rail. And it also increases the fare by 12.5%. The FY25 operating budget gap of $750 million is proposed to be closed by a combination of revenue increases, expense reduction techniques, and a temporary lifting of the 3% cap on the operating subsidy growth, which is something that really impacts the Virginia jurisdictions quite a bit. And then increase funding assistance by the partners, that's the jurisdiction partners that are part of the WMATA compact. There's going to be public hearings on the proposed budget in February, and they are anticipating a budget adoption in April 2024. So if we want to provide a letter, it's something I can certainly draft. I think we could still sign it next month if the board wants to acknowledge it, or I can certainly just send something for you as the chair to send if we wanted to do something sooner. I don't know if there's a specific deadline for public comment. I assume there is. I just don't know it off the top of my head. So if we want to provide input, we certainly could.
Yeah, I think we do try to weigh in every year, and I think it would be good for us to do that. There's one thing I'd read in the press that I was curious about if the city had more insight in, which is that it sounded like WMATA still wanted to go ahead with some of the better bus network changes, but maybe in a cost neutral sort of way. But I don't know, have there been any more specificity as to what those are, the ones that would affect Alexandria? Because some of the ones that we saw would probably require new resources because they were adding. But I think those are things that we might want to hone in on that could have potentially, especially if they're taking away from some areas in order to provide more service and others that we may want to weigh in on.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen an update on the Better Bus Network. My staff might have been involved in that, but I thought that there was a bit of a pause on that as they were figuring out the budget and what cuts were happening. Maybe that has been come back. Martin might actually know better than I do about that, but I haven't seen anything come through on that recently. So, okay.
So it sounds like where we stand now, we shouldn't expect major changes on the Metro bus side for next fiscal year. I mean, I realize that could change, but that's your understanding of where WMATA is, right?
So I also want to just hit on the fact that Capital Bike Share had its highest ridership year last year. We had record ridership numbers across the system. So we had expanded our bike share stations, I think about 2 years ago. I think we put in a number of new stations, and right now we are focusing on replacement. Our original stations are getting older, so we need to replace those stations. That's kind of our focus. But in 2023, we had about 110,000 trips that started or ended in the city. And then the e-bikes have also been really popular in Alexandria. So we are investing in more e-bikes to build that portion of the system up so that there's more available in Alexandria for our residents. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight the Alex West Small Area Planning process. There'll be a meeting on March 4th. It'll be a virtual meeting, and this is going to include the transportation and street layout recommendations for the plan. And so just for some background, as part of the planning process, this is an update to the Beauregard Small Area Plan, but it's also expanded the area. And there's been a number of meetings over the past year. But yes, so if you're interested in seeing the transportation draft recommendations that are part of that plan, March 4th is the date to hear that. That is it for me. Thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to our board member recruitment update. And Matt, thank you for joining us as well. And Matt and Hillary comprised a committee that, Murat and Matt had looked at the initial applications that were 21, which I want to note, we think is the highest number of applications we've ever received for dashboard. And looking at some of them, I was saying to Beth before we sat down, I was just struck by reading about just how many are themselves regular riders of Dash, and really talked about how this system is so important to moving them and moving their kids and family members. And I think 15 years ago, we had a lot of people who were just like, hey, we need a good, well-functioning transit system. But the fact that so many people are now regular riders and see the value, and it speaks to the investments that we've made in transit. We can seat up to 3 board members. We have to seat at least 1 to get back to the minimum threshold of 9, but we can seat up to 3. The committee, so Matt and Murat had whittled it down, I believe, to 6, and then Hillary and Matt looked at the applications further, and I believe interviewed 4 candidates and are recommending 3 for adoption. So we will be a full board again. Any nominations that we consider would go on the slate to City Council as the stockholders when they meet at the stockholder meeting. And when they vote on the slate, they have to either vote up or down on it. So it's not like other boards and commissions where they can kind of make substitutes or vote on, individual candidates or take someone that we didn't recommend and include them, but they could decide not to take the slate. That would be the only way they could do kind of a declination of what we have. So you have applications. I sent the 3 that Matt and Hillary were recommending. There are also hard copies here at the table. So I'll turn this over to Matt and Hillary and let them talk about kind of their process and walk us through the candidates they're recommending.
You or me, Hillary? I'm happy to go through it quickly. First of all, we actually interviewed 6 folks over the phone via Zoom. And again, I'm sorry I'm not there person tonight. All 21 had pluses and minuses. Obviously, the 6 were all fantastic, and we ultimately whittled it down to 3. That was before we knew Murat was going to be leaving the board, and we were going to toss it over to you to suggest which 2. But the positive side of Murat leaving, and we'll miss you, Murat, is all 3 of our folks now we have seats for. I don't know if Josh, I'm sorry, a little bit of COVID fog. Dave, if you want me to go through each of the pluses and minuses, I'm happy to do that. Or Hillary, if you want to jump in, that's fine too.
So I'm going to assume we've each read the applications at least, but you all had a little bit more interaction with them, and in some cases were able to talk. I know for those that served on the DAC, you were able to talk to the DAC chair and get some feedback. So why don't you help us kind of expand, understand kind of the pluses and minuses, what you saw in each of the three that you said this person's going to add this to the board and this is important for us.
Sure. So Praveen came highly recommended by people who've been on the board, the mayor, Jesse, Jim Capps is our former board colleague who, if he's like Josh, if he's like Jim or Jesse, he'll be an awesome board member. He is on the Environmental Policy Commission. He's an electric bus advocate. And obviously all three, it goes without saying, are strong advocates for public transportation, including bus, and including Dash, more importantly. Kirsten is a member of the DAC committee. She's a long-term city resident as well as a frequent Dash rider. We considered that strongly. She's also a grant funding writer or reviewer in her professional life. And we thought that would go a long way and bring a skill set that this board needs. And then Arish is a 2-year resident. He's also on DAC. We were a little, like, wow, why would a 2-year resident want to be on this? And it wasn't until we spoke with him, we were like, wow, he's quite a go-getter. I believe he may be on this phone call or at least attending virtually. So anyway, he's also a lawyer, which will make my own malpractice insurance go down by half. So I look forward to having someone with a bar membership to help me out, even though, of course, I don't give advice, legal advice. He really is just a huge promoter of greater public access to transit, public transit. And I think he'll be a fantastic member, as all of them will be on our board.
And then you had interviewed, you said 6. So had one withdrew, I think, during the interviews, or was that before you all had interviewed? There was one applicant who had
that person did withdraw, yes.
Was that one of the ones you'd interviewed, or was that person
Yes.
before? Okay. So it was one candidate who withdrew, and then you had 2 others that you interviewed who at this time, just given the strength of the pool, you're not recommending for consideration.
Yeah. I
but
mean, they
both very strong candidates.
Yeah, if something opened up, I think they'd be great additions to the board.
So what is the preference for members in terms of further discussion of these and vetting of these candidates before we seat them, or vote whether to nominate them to the slate?
Did you guys have any more West End candidates or far West End candidates? Because we don't have that really represented a lot on this board.
I don't recall specifically, AJ.
I believe one of the others was a Central Alexandria resident. But I don't think.
Of
And
the
then-
21 applicants, then what about the
I only
6?
saw the whittled down pool. And one of them lives right off Duke Street. So kind of central,
Yeah, this one.
central Alexandria. I don't think so. Out of the
Of the 6? Okay. Is it any way, Beth, that you could email me those 6? Because I don't think I saw the applications.
From my recollection, there were 4 that were interviewed. I think 6 were looked at initially, but I think in the end, 4 were interviewed.
I was confused about that.
Yeah,
What's
because
the
I
board?
set up 4 Zoom interviews with
Okay.
Matt and Hillary.
Yes, Matt, I
Okay.
think you're remembering incorrectly.
Okay, yeah, that
did
could be.
We did interview, there were 6 applications and we interviewed 4.
Okay.
And I believe one of them withdrew. Did one of the 6 withdrew?
One of the
Still
6.
had 4, and then the other one was a Central Alexandria.
Other questions for Matt and Hillary?
Mr. Chair, if I might, I would just remind the board that as we did last time, and some of these candidates, I believe, I'm not sure which ones had applied previously and served on the DAC.
Mhm.
So our process now that the DAC exists is to reach out to everyone who applies to be a board member and consider them for the DAC as well. So independent of whether someone received an interview or not, and whether someone was recommended, then we will follow through with that pool of people that comes through. Because we're always looking for members to serve on the DAC, and we feel this is an opportunity to give them the exposure to DASH and the opportunity to further develop themselves and potentially be a candidate for the board in the future, which has turned out to be the case with some of the ones that are recommended. So if any are listening in, they'll receive a communication from us after the process is done, and then be given information about how to follow up with us to help have that conversation.
So I appreciate that, but I don't want the DAC to just become like the only pathway to become board member of DASH. I don't think that should be the policy, a prerequisite, for serving on the full dashboard. So I see two of the candidates that presented in this packet are current DAC members, and I appreciate that, but it should not be a prerequisite to join this board.
I mean, I think it's helpful. It's a new body that, we're trying to get a lot of expertise, and it is a way to kind of get familiar with DASH, because you want someone to come in who can hit the ground running as a board member and understands kind of how the system works. But I do appreciate that. I mean, people bring different skill sets, and it's not a prerequisite to do it, but it certainly shows, I think, a level of interest and commitment to DASH. And I believe one of the other finalists was a DAC member as well. That you'd considered. So I do look favorably on that when I see an application of someone who has been participating and has shown, interest in a lot of the issues and commitment to it. But I agree that it doesn't mean that that's the only pipeline, but I think it is an important way to kind of harness talent, because there's a lot of interest in being on our board, 21 applicants. Yeah.
And so these are really impressive candidates, Matt and Hillary. Thank you so much for doing the work to get us to this point. Adjustion noted last night, and I noticed this as well. One of these three candidates was just appointed to the traffic and parking board last night. So to the extent that we, sort of reach out and say, hey, we're, interested in offering you a role at DASH as well, and that person just makes the determination on her own that she doesn't have the time to serve. Do we still have the timing where we could potentially reach out to that fourth person was interviewed or that fifth person in the finalist pool, just because I do think seating 3 board members is the advantageous thing to do right now. So I'm just curious if we have any insider perspective on kind of the mechanics of actually yielding all 3 people that we potentially want to put on the sort of slate to the stockholders.
Yes, that was very helpful to information. I left council before they got to that point last night. But I did reach out to her to see if she was interested and would be able to have the time commitment for both boards. And she did say she did want to do both boards. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, just for the record, people have free will. I want them to their time commitment. That's their choice. I was just flagging that for consideration. But if you have the time and can make the commitment to serve on multiple boards in the city, that's more power to you. I just don't. So I appreciate you guys looking into that. But I just want to be clear. I believe in free will and everything. People make their own decisions. I wasn't trying to disqualify anyone from anything.
No, that's fine. And I mean, several of us serve on multiple boards, including David and me
And to be clear,
and Jesse.
You sent the email 5 minutes before. I noted the exact same thing and wanted to also raise the question. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Council dockets very closely.
So I'm glad we have such engaged residents. And I would just note too that Marat had been our representative to the Transportation Commission. So as that is a requirement of the Transportation Commission that we have someone from the dashboard. So that's something that we'll need to think about as a board too, who would take that spot.
Hillary, a question on that. That's where I was going with this issue. Were the individuals that were interviewed asked if they had a commitment to participate as the DASH representative on the Transportation Commission, or will we have to go through another process of trying to find someone to do that? I know when the last recruitment action that I was involved in, that was specifically a question that we posed to the applicants.
It was not because at the time we did the interviews, we did not know that was Marat was resigning. So I think once we have once we have our full board, then we can throw that out there and make that determination.
And I had assumed that among our current board members that probably nobody was gonna, we were gonna look to our new board members essentially to fill that seat. I know Steve has served previously. Matt, Jesse, and I are on other boards. Our city staff, I know, can't fill that role. I know Jasha has said, in terms of time, that it's, this is important to, and I agree, it is important to have a focus on, on a board. And and this does require time, and it's important to have full commitment to it. I do think the Traffic and Parking Board, though, parallel could offer some advantages to us, especially as we talk about things like accessibility at stops, and that person's going to hear a lot about that over the months and be able to push that forward. So, yeah, I do hope. I mean, I certainly hope with all, we've had some candidates who've joined and then maybe after a year in the past have decided, oh, I just don't have the time for this anymore, have moved on to other things professionally. And that's, our staff especially spends a lot of time helping our new candidates kind of get up to speed and acclimated. And, it's always disappointing when that person isn't able then to serve for a very long period of time. So, I hope that we're getting folks who are really excited about it. And that's part of why I also think the DAC can be a good indicator of that, because if somebody served on the DAC is still fairly new, but if somebody's got 2 years of service there before they join our board, that shows, I think, a sustained interest in Dash and does, reflect positively for me. I thank Hillary and Matt for their work on the committee as well. And
I know it's not easy. Yes, thank you for your diligence.
but I will, when I talk to the candidates after, at the appropriate point in the process, I will certainly raise the possibility of the Transportation Commission, and we'll see if we can get somebody on there. I think, Hillary, that's generally a 3-year. It was a 2 or 3 year. I don't know if you know off the top of your head, a 2 or 3 year appointment, but
I don't know for the representatives of the board
Oh,
how that
okay.
works. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, it's just for
that's
as long
right.
as-
Right, for the Dash appointee.
okay,
There-
okay.
I
They
don't
don't
think
serve a
there's a
fixed.
time
They don't
limit.
serve a fixed term like a citizen
Right,
member who.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly somebody could try that for a year, and then if they decide, I can't anymore, likely our Traffic and Parking Board applicant, we probably would not put on three boards would be, I think, certainly pushing it. But hopefully among the other two, we can find someone who's interested in that. Any further discussion? All right, then I will ask if there's a motion to add the 3 applicants as recommended by the committee to the slate.
So moved.
Moved by Steve, second. Jesse, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. We always allow time in our board meeting for any others among us who serve on boards and commissions or civic groups. If there's anything for the benefit of the group, now's the time. All right. If not, I'll turn it over to Josh for the general manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the board. I have a brief report tonight, but one of the more exciting parts of it for many of us here at Dash and hopefully for the board is we finally have a new director of marketing and community engagement who has accepted the job, and we are stealing from the city. And Hillary, sorry, she's the only one probably here at the table who's not excited about this. But she will be joining us next month. Or this month, and be joining us here at the board meeting next month. I wanted to tell you a little bit about her. So her name is Camilla, and Camilla is joining us from TNES at the city. She is a bilingual communicator and journalist with 10 years of experience across various industries. She's bringing many strengths in everything from press releases to op-eds, websites, social media, and community outreach. Camilla has extensive experience in the city of Alexandria. She'll be joining us after most recently serving as the Senior Communications Officer for TNES. In that role, she led content creation, handled media relations, community outreach, and much, much more. Prior to her time at the city, Camilla worked at the George Washington University Medical Faculty Associates, Hispanic Access Foundation, and Alexandria City Public Schools. Beyond her communication expertise, Camilla offers bilingual fluency in Spanish and English. She holds advanced technical skills in social media platforms, email marketing, content management, and graphic design. She also has international experience, having worked in Colombia and the United States. She'll start with us on the February 26th She'll hit the ground running, again, as our Director of Marketing and Community Engagement. She's taking over a role that was vacated by Whitney Code nearly a year ago. This has been a very difficult role for us to fill, and the role has changed. This is now a director, so this is a part of the senior leadership team at Dash. Her responsibilities will include all outreach activities for Dash, marketing and community events, communications, customer service, graphic design, website development, staff liaison for the Dash Advisory Committee, and much, much more. And we will plan to have her attend in March for a formal introduction. So we're very impressed with her as a candidate. We're very excited to have her join the team. I know that Martin will finally get some sleep at night and to have this off of his plate. And we appreciate your patience as we've gone through what I would say an unending process with multiple final offers, negotiations, bringing people in for interviews just for them to decline the offer and us start all over again. So good luck to TNS for filling these shoes, because it has been a year-long process of struggles for us. But I have reached out both to Hillary and Adriana to let them know that we are partners and we do not want to take away a valuable resource from them without supporting them during that transition process. So I will be committing her time to assist the city when there are things that pop up that she may know about that no one has information on, much in the same ways we have always tried to do whenever the city has tried to do whenever someone from Dash goes to work for them. So this is a partnership. We don't want to affect the other parts of the organization negatively, but we're very excited to have her nonetheless. So looking forward to introducing her at the next meeting. Hillary, please don't beat her up when she comes in. So.
No, I'm very happy for her, and this will be great for her. It's a great team to work with here. We will miss her, but good job, you guys, for getting her, because she is excellent. So be a great addition to Dash.
The next item in my update is this is actually a response. There is a memo in your packet to you, Jesse. You had issued a question a couple meetings ago regarding our electric fleet strategy. And I see Praveen in the audience. I remember fondly meeting Praveen many years ago when we started talking about electrification. So good timing for you to join tonight. But a couple of highlights from the memo that is in your packet. It is from Ray. Ray is our Chief Infrastructure and Development Officer. So all of this type of work falls under her purview. But essentially, we've made a lot of progress on fleet electrification. We have 14 battery electric buses in operation now for over 5 years. We are a regional leader, as well as in Virginia, with our goal to be fully zero emission by 2037. The challenge that sparked, I think, your inquiry on this, Jesse, was manufacturer of 7 of those buses. Proterra did file for bankruptcy, which has caused delayed repairs, reduced support, and those buses to be out of commission for extended periods of time. We have received word that they were acquired out of bankruptcy by a group called Phoenix Motor Cars. We don't know much about them, but I, as recently as yesterday, received a communication about that restructure and the fact that they had brought Proterra staff over with them. However, the future is very uncertain of that company and that product. Nonetheless, the reality is the bus manufacturer market is incredibly narrow and unpredictable. And we've even seen recent exits from the market. Nova Bus was a major manufacturer and provider of buses in North America, has exited the market, as well as most recently ENC. These really highlight the issue that we're dealing with. And I have participated in conversations with the Community Transportation Association of America, APTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and others as we talk about this issue within the market and how potentially the federal dollars that are being poured into this can actually be more effectively used. The reality is we're very limited on the things that can happen to speed through the use of that money, and FTA has been open to relaxing some of their requirements to help us get there. But nonetheless, this problem is not going to go away. In fact, it's probably going to get worse. So we do have a few mitigation strategies that we've been employing. First of all, we have a diverse fleet. We have avoided relying on a single supplier. This is relatively uncommon in transit systems of our size. It does create some challenges in the sense that we have to stock parts from various manufacturers. Our technicians have to be trained on a variety of different products. Our drivers have to learn the dynamics of the different vehicles that they operate. But we do know and have proven that our decision from day one to do this was the right decision for this very reason of what we've just experienced. Industry standards and the adoption for interoperability, the reality is that the industry is working hard to standardize technology as well as charging infrastructure. It has been a slow process, but we are making progress on that. Holding the OEMs to that has been one of our goals. In fact, we have chargers from both manufacturers, and we require that the buses charge on each other's chargers, which they have not enjoyed doing, and they have not enjoyed how much we have had to work with them in regards to problems related to that interoperability. But we have required that. We have very robust specifications. We include common components, and we also spec our buses to be compatible, upward compatible with future technologies and charging technologies. We have a lot of technician training in the pipeline. We actually are a leader in some of this in the sense that we have been featured in a number of industry training seminars and workshops that have been developed to help other transit systems understand the technology and use it. I will also point out the fact that Dash facility is not equipped to work on electric buses, and that is not something that has been dealt with or addressed at this point. It is a costly endeavor to deal with that, but for some reason, just as an example, when this facility was built, there were no overhead cranes installed. Overhead cranes are required in order to be able to work on these types of vehicles, and it's not just electric buses, but the hybrid buses that make up a majority of our fleet were purchased without ever dealing with that. So we have some challenges that we certainly face, but our technicians do the very best they can. Unfortunately, things have to get outsourced as a result of those shortfalls. And lastly, we have been doing a lot of data infrastructure and technology to try to understand charging. Charge management is one of the technologies that you've heard about. We've applied for money with the state to implement that. We have a demo going on, and that's something that is going to have play a huge role in our use of electric vehicles and the deployment of them in real world. Right now, they're sort of dummy charged, and so we end up with a lot of hands-on having to kind of get out there, plug them in, understand what's going on with the vehicle when it's ready to go out. And frankly, they just don't get used as much as a result. They can't do an equivalent to what a diesel bus does today. We're still far from that. And so the staff really have to manage that. But charge management will play a key role in getting us there. Last couple of bullets here, advocacy and collaboration. We actively advocate for industry improvement. One of those things was my restructure and the assignment of Ray to oversee these areas, recognizing that we are not only a leader in this, but we need resources internally dedicated to projects, capital projects that are associated with this technology. And regionally and nationally, we're talking a lot about this. So our experience is setting the groundwork. And frankly, the reality is that we're not going to be perfect, and we're going to have some slips and trips during this process. We've gone from being an organization that only did what was proven, and at the very end, we're now the leaders in that. And there's a lot of risk associated with that, but we're proud of that. And we're making some changes in order to accommodate that. For example, holding on to assets that may need to be, quote, mothballed as contingency fleet to be pulled back out in the event that we have a full outage of our electric fleet, just like what's happened with Proterra. If we were heavier into Proterra and didn't have those backup assets, we would not have met service. And that's an unacceptable policy for Dash. It's not something that we can do as a provider of transit. And so we've recognized that and planned for that. So a lot going on there. We do remain committed to zero emission goals, despite those challenges, and we are feeling pretty proactive in that. So I welcome any questions related to the memo that's in the packet or what I've just explained. And Ray's still here in the room, so I will let Ray also speak to that. Matt, I do see your hand went up on the Zoom.
Yeah, so still no go on hydrogen fuel cells?
The main issue behind hydrogen, and Ray can come up to the podium and tell me if I'm missing anything, is the available space and infrastructure locally here. So I actually spent a lot of time in a system out in the desert. Sun Tran, right? Suntran is out in the Coachella Valley, Palm Springs area, and it's like a totally different world. They just have endless land behind them. So they just build all these buildings that they can create hydrogen in, and it's not an issue. We're landlocked. We have no room here, and our fleet is growing, and we're out of space. So that's not been an option for us. But I think, Matt, the other reason we haven't spent a lot of time looking at it is because our service profile is very agreeable to electric, especially if we get some on-route charging infrastructure out there, because we're covering such a small square mile footprint. And frankly, the fastest our buses travel on a daily basis are up and down 395 to the Pentagon, which is actually really hard on electric vehicles. But that's the only part of the service profile. But I'll let Ray come up and just add to anything that I might have missed.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, as you recall, remember there was that beautiful hydrogen fuel cell bus parked in front of City Hall a few years back. We all got to take a ride on or at least touch. And I think it was a Dayton company that was building that, or it may have been New Flyer. I don't recall. Are there any other electric bus providers other than the ones we're dealing with now? I mean, it just seems like the market needs to grow.
Yeah, and to add to that response, I respond a couple of different places. To add to Josh's response, hydrogen requires a couple of different key ingredients in order for success. Some of that is space, land, and the other half is supply. And unfortunately, where we are in this region, and especially given our facility and the footprint of this facility, we just don't have a lot of those key ingredients to have hydrogen as an easy option. In the perfect world, we would love to be able to consider hydrogen, but as of the circumstances as of today, we just don't have enough of those key ingredients to consider hydrogen as a viable option. We do propose, we do advocate regionally and also, throughout the industry for the industry to find ways to increase supply and to find lower profile ways to deliver hydrogen. And when, if that day comes, hopefully, that could be reconsidered. But as of today, it's just not a viable option. To answer your second question, when we first started procuring battery electric buses, that particular technology was very premature at the time. There's really two manufacturers at that time that produced a viable product that we were comfortable with, and those are the two products that you see in our fleet, Proterra and New Flyer. Fortunately for us, we've seen a lot of the remainder of the industry advance towards that technology, start to adopt it, and start to embrace it. So today we do have a few more options as far as producers of battery electric buses. Gillig has entered the market. ENC briefly entered, and now they've exited the market. Novabus similarly as well. There's also a few foreign or non-traditional manufacturers that are trying to break their way into the market. So we're just kind of standing by the wayside and seeing what comes out of fruition. As options leave the market, I'm sure a few others might find ways to enter over the next couple of years.
You guys mentioned that we don't have the space or capacity to hold hydrogen and our facility is too old, essentially. Are we applying for funding to assist with that, to make it a possibility in the near future? Is there anything from the Infrastructure Law or Inflation Reduction Act that has grant money for the feds that we could apply for to retrofit the facility to make this possible and build more space? Or are we trying to get more space in the city somewhere, or Fairfax County, I don't know, to house more buses?
I'll say that one of the biggest challenges that make hydrogen one of the realities that make hydrogen a big challenge for us is the fact that our primary facility, this building, is a concrete vault. Fully indoor parking, concrete vault. It's not even set up for natural gas or expandable gases. So the characteristics of hydrogen largely follow natural gas. And so just by the nature of this building existing the way it is, makes it in large part preclusive without major modifications in order to accommodate hydrogen or any type of expandable gas. We have seen that a lot of properties that do venture into hydrogen tend to do so by way of a different facility, a new facility, or a new site.
And to your point, Jaysha, about opportunity on federal funds, we just got obviously a huge award for electric vehicles and the electric charging infrastructure. The grants that we have that are options for us to go after being discretionary are very rarely, if ever, awarded to an awardee sequentially year after year. So we could apply again. We don't have hydrogen spec'd out in our implementation plans, and many of the studies that we've done have dismissed it for many of the reasons we talked about tonight. And as a result, we don't even really necessarily have a platform to say to FTA in our application that we would even be capable of implementing hydrogen. Again, that could change between now and 2037. But I think that in the short term, and I'm talking the next 5 to 7 years, our capacity to, one, develop a plan for such a technology, 2, apply for, and 3, be granted money to do it is pretty slim. And so I think that our focusing on the strategy to be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish by investing instead in chargers in the community that the buses utilize, to me is the approach that makes the most sense for what Dash is capable of doing today. That could change again as this technology continues to develop. But that's, I think, a lot of the other reason you've kind of seen us somewhat dismiss it. It's not because we don't believe in it as a technology. It's just that our capacity to execute it is much more limited.
Ray, that was a very measured way of saying we don't want the building to be a bomb. That was great. So first of all, this memo is fantastic. Thank you so much. I think when we started this conversation in December, this was exactly the conversation that we wanted to have, which was kind of just to understand how you guys are approaching the risk mitigation around this. I think it's super compelling to see the sort of fleet diversification efforts. I personally, I love the workforce development aspect of getting you guys cross-trained on this stuff. I think the remaining questions that I have, similar to Jason's question about our facility, we don't have an overhead crane. Is retrofitting could the building be retrofitted to have an overhead crane or not at all? And if yes, like what does that cost? I guess what I'm getting at is like, if we are incurring ongoing costs having to put these buses out for maintenance at the other site, at what point, like, would we catch up to just retrofitting it to have the overhead crane? It's not really a comparison point.
I mean, I'll let Ray add to this, but my understanding is the facility can be retrofitted. It has not been a part of our capital program at this point. Your point is good, and it is one I think that's in the back of our minds. And I think that will also depend on what the outcome is of our expansion of the facility, because there has been talk within that plan and I've seen reference to maintenance components. And how we might build in that. The reality is we're up against a lot of challenges regarding finding the funding.
Totally. Yeah. I think I'm curious just in regards of like, if the break-even point is 10 years, probably not worth it. But if the break-even point's like 3 years, then maybe it's something that we do actually try to get creative around how we could find the funding for that. Last question. I'm curious. I think I'm again very much struck by the strategy of having Proterra and New Flyer, and sort of as one's been down, we've still had the other. As we see increased reliability around, say, the New Flyer platform, is there a plan to step down that diversification and take on more of a footing with one supplier as we trust them? And I guess what I'm asking is, in doing so, is there a potential for regional alignment to go with a provider that makes that provider stronger, right? Like makes one of them less likely to go bankrupt, makes one of them less likely to have supply chain disruptions because more of us are committing to that one particular platform?
I believe that the need to mitigate by maximizing diversification likely won't go away, even if technology matures
Yeah.
or a particular manufacturer gains a stronghold in a particular technology. Again, for those reasons,
Yeah.
there's no even it's to say Proterra, for example, was the name in electric buses, and look what happened. We, we believe it's still vital for future mitigation and kind of proofing of our fleet. To continue diversification. And we can't really predict whether or not New Florida Gillick or any one of these other companies could go out of business, get restructured, get acquired, or have some type of organizational restructure. So for as long as Dash has existed, we've always maintained a diversified fleet. Even back in the simple days of diesel, we've always been half this and half that.
Yeah.
So
That's cool. Great. And then last comment, I know this is something that you all already do, but I would encourage you to continue to kind of be like creative and active participants in this market. Something like Proterra happens again, forming a consortium with other systems to acquire those maintenance assets. Like I know you guys look at all of that. And I'd encourage you just to continue to do so.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you for this. You mentioned that the market's kind of narrowing and who's providing this, and that there's a couple foreign entrants possibly in the market. Did our Lono grant come with any stipulations about, you hear about Buy America and stuff? Is that one of the limiting factors?
Yes. With federal money, it very much is a limiting factor. With local money, not as much. So we are bound by that. And again, a lot of it is going to be shaped and influenced by our future funding infrastructure of our fleet.
The last thing I would say is we have a good problem. And that problem is that we are carrying more people than we've ever carried before. And the demand for our service is growing. So we've talked about this even in your walkthrough, Art, and I've talked to the board about this. Part of the strategy that I've given Ray, and we're all on board with, is we need to be thinking about programming vehicles in the future to be larger. And the other interesting part is that the 60-foot bus product is only offered by one manufacturer at this point. So even in a diesel equivalent, you don't even have the ability to buy from 3 different manufacturers. So it's just an interesting industry, and it's one that I've spent my career in, and it's always been a challenge because we're a small piece of the money that's out there, really relatively to things like trucks and other sort of big industries, and even the private coach industry and whatnot. So Ray's got a tough job with his colleagues getting out there in the community and across the country talking about this and finding solutions, but I'm confident we're going to continue to be a leader in that. All right. So just another piece of great news. Every month so far this fiscal year has been a record-breaking month. In fact, October was the highest ridership in the history of Dash. You can see the trend here. The green lines there are last year's record-breaking year. The red, the green bars, the red line is where we are this year. And you can see what happens in the winter and what happens in the spring. So we are anticipating that we will have a busy spring. And we're looking forward to celebrating that. The last item that I'm going to report on here, just to save some back and forth, is some highlights on our financials, which are included in your packet. Our projected year-end deficit has continued to decrease, which is good news. And I see a smile out of Kendall, and that's a smile out of me too. I know. And we continue to see good news. And this change still has not seen the impact of the restructure that we did. So the restructure is still coming, and we anticipate that will continue to turn this corner for us. And we're optimistic that we'll have success with that, and look forward to celebrating with Kendall, not having to have her pull her hair out at the end of the year. can't help you with anybody else, but we'll do our best here. On the fuel side, we did, I tasked the team with researching fuel and ways to make fuel more predictable for our budget. And I know that for all of, not just Kendall, but for all our budget folks in the room, the thing that budget people and finance people hate the most is unpredictability. Even if you can predict a bad situation, it's good to have a prediction and be able to stick with it as opposed to the volatility that we've experienced. And we're still not out of that. I mean, the reality is things could change in a month for us for various reasons, but fuel tends to be the one that does that. So finding a way to create more stability in fuel has been a priority for me and my team. We have found, we've been researching every possible avenue. Interestingly, we looked historically at what fleet in the city has been paying compared to what Dash has been paying, since we're not under the same purchasing process. And we've largely tracked the same. In fact, in some cases, we've been lower than what fleet is paying. So we say all of this because part of our goal here is to address Dash. The other thing is we want a partnership with the city. If we find an avenue to help improve this, we're going to be talking with fleet about that, because that is also a benefit to help talk about what are the options out there that we could potentially come together and create that stability. So more to come on fuel. There's no way to lock in prices for an entire year. I was really hopeful that was the case. But there are certainly options out there, and we're looking at those. And we'll be talking more about that in the future. That is it for my report. Are
Josh,
there any
quick
questions
question
about
on
my
the
report
budget?
or financials? Sure.
I see we're positive on the labor side for maintenance and negative variance for the material supplies, et cetera. It's good that we're incurring these expenses because it appears as if the maintenance is being done, but are you in a position where you're not really fully executing the maintenance program because of the availability of funds?
So our preventative maintenance program is still, I think the last I saw was 95%, 94 to 95% on time, which is within our expectations. What you're seeing is two things. One is that we are short a few people in maintenance, but maintenance is also going through the same restructure process. But that has not hampered our ability to perform maintenance. In fact, if anything, our deadline and our fleet has had more uptime than we've seen in the past. What you're really seeing in that is two things. One is that parts and supplies are astronomically higher than they have been in years past. That line didn't really change much year over year. And so the combined effects of the pandemic, supply chain issues, inflation, and all those things, it's really just a matter of we're still buying the same parts and we're still doing the same work. It's just costing that much more to do it, to acquire those parts. And I think you might have been out, I think it was a meeting or two ago, I did a little comparison, and I can certainly send you that I asked the team to look at, for example, the difference in cost of a part on an electric bus versus a part on a regular diesel bus. And while the common shared parts are of similar costs, certain components of that electric bus can be 3, 4, 5, 6 times more expensive, if not more. And so that is also potentially having a long-term impact on really the amount of money we need to set aside for parts and supplies.
Yeah, I just don't want to have us turn into a situation that WMATA had years ago where they were deferring maintenance and there was a significant price to pay for that, not just financially. So you're able to execute.
Never going to have that happen under my watch.
Thank you for that.
I agree with you on that priority for sure. Did we discuss it last month? Oh, sure. So we're good. Yeah, we're good. We're a few dollars short, but I think out of a $40,000 fundraising goal, we're up to 35. 36,000 committed of that goal. We were a little annoyed with some folks and they kind of came in a little cheap on us. I'm not going to call names, but we're very thankful for everyone who has stepped up And we have a lot of different suppliers and entities who have come to the table. So I want to thank you for bringing that up, because I want to give a nod to the team that's been working on that between Ray and Martin. There's a lot of people not in this room, probably because they're exhausted from dealing with this, including our event planner who's been working on it. It's going to be a phenomenal event. We hope that you all will be there. Please remember to RSVP. If you haven't already done so, it is noted at the bottom of the agenda there. There will be food, there will be drink, again, drink only courtesy of our sponsors. There will be dancing, there will be a program, there will be a video presentation featuring a history of Dash, and many faces who are here today and faces who are from the past we've actually been able to track down to include in the video. So, the event itself will include the awards process ceremony for Dash staff. And we're excited to help have David and Paul, our past chair, be there and help us to present some of those awards as well. And then everyone is welcome, if you're a late night owl, to even after the event is over. I think the event is from 5 to 10. And then there's an extra hour across the street. Is that right? At the Hilton. The Hilton has donated a hospitality suite for an hour across the street. So just wear your comfortable shoes. Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for yeah, thank you for recognizing that. And we will always accept more money. So if you know anyone, it's dashbus.com/-40th. It has the sponsorship information, the tiers, how to get in touch with us, what the sponsorships get people, who our sponsors are. So yeah, we'll always take that. Okay.
And Josh, Dash will be providing transportation to and from the Hilton up to the Masonic Memorials. Right now, it is very treacherous to walk because of the project going on at the intersection. So there will be.
Yes. Okay. And we do have the access to the parking lot up there for individuals who do drive in the back. So
who would drive to a transit celebration? Being facetious, obviously. I will be using the shuttle service. Okay. Martin, please.
Advertise that there will be access to the observation deck at the Masonic Temple. If you've never been up there, it's a great view. What's that? It's free. It's during the cocktail hour, at least we will have access to go up there. The elevator's a little shaky, so. Yeah.
And I think the temple will be lit up in our colors, blue and yellow.
We're hoping. We're working on it.
Martin, quickly. Good.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've got a couple planning items tonight. They're both information items. No specific board action is requested. We are going to switch the order a little bit just for purposes of efficiency. The first item is an update on the Ladre site redevelopment. This was an item that came before council last month, and during the hearing, one of the items that came up was the bus stops in the area. So David had asked, and we thought it was a good idea to bring this to the board to make sure that you guys were updated on the situation. And I think it's come to a good resolution, but we just want to make sure you guys were in the loop. So for those that aren't familiar, Dash Planning, myself, and our service planning manager, Tristan Cunningham, are closely involved with the city's development review process. We are able to work with planning and zoning and test staff for all the applications that come through. We have obviously a big focus on the ones that are adjacent to bus routes and bus stops. Often we'll be looking at the bus stops to make sure they're maintained and they're accessible during construction, and that the final designs have those stops are maintained. And as much as we can, we ask for improvements to those stops as well. You know, developers are often able to build new shelters, curb extensions, benches, different amenities. So that's probably one of our best ways to get bus stop improvements is through that process. So in this instance, there's a redevelopment. The applicant is redeveloping the Ladre site in Old Town North. It's between Wythe and Pendleton next to Fairfax Street. This is the location for the Ladre high-rise senior apartments, as well as the Annie B. Rose senior facility. You can kind of see the Annie B. Rose as the ABR orange rectangle in the bottom left or southwest quadrant of the parcel there in yellow. So we do have a lot of dash service on Fairfax right there, including a bus stop on the southbound side that's right in the middle of the block where that site is being redeveloped. So they're redeveloping the site. There's going to be a multi-level residential tower that will include senior housing. I believe the existing Ladre Tower is being, the residents will be able to be moved into that new facility. And then the Annie B. Rose is not affected by the redevelopment. So there will be continue to be a large number of senior residents on this block for, you know, decades and decades to come. So what we had proposed originally was that we were going to relocate the bus stop, the mid-block bus stop from mid-block on southbound Fairfax to about 150 feet north, closer to the Wythe intersection. That was because we tend to try to avoid mid-block stops where we can for safety reasons, but also because for space purposes, if we're getting curb extension, it's much safer near the intersection for crossing. So that was the original proposal. Also, the applicant is including a curb extension and a very large ADA pad and a new bus shelter. The shelter at this location is pretty old. It's an old WMATA shelter. So that was the original proposal. As it was progressing through the Planning Commission and City Council, some of the residents of Annie B. Rose raised a very valid concern that their bus stop that they use today is being moved about 150 feet further away from their front door. So we were able to work with test staff and with the development team to find a solution. And the solution that we came up with was that the next stop down, the one at Orinoco, which is further south in the diagram you see there, would be moved a half block up to kind of compensate for the move from the development. The benefits of that is for the Annie B. Rose house is that their new stop at Pendleton would be about 90 feet closer than the stop they had today. And because of the alignment of the 34, which turns left on Pendleton before this parcel, they would actually have access to three routes at that stop instead of the two, just 30 and 31. So they can get the 34 at that stop at Pendleton now. We also were able to get contributions from the developer to install a large ADA pad and 2 benches. So one on the new Pendleton stop southbound, and then also one on the existing northbound stop. So we should have a lot better stops there going forward. Shorter walk for Annie B. Rose residents and for Ladre residents with the new stop on Wythe. But overall, I think it's a good solution, we hope, and hopefully will encourage continued ridership in that area. And I should mention that council did approve the application. And I think a lot of the commenters that were at the public hearing, it was a large public hearing. There was a lot of people that wanted to comment on it. I think the ones that were concerned about the bus stops, once staff notified them about the change, they were pleased with that. So just wanted to provide that. Any comments or questions? Happy to take those now.
I had a question. Oh, go ahead.
Not at this level. Yeah, we have a Title VI policy that's for larger changes. At this level, there's not as much. There's not. Yeah. Are you concerned about the Orinoco? The fact that we're moving away from Orinoco, or? Yeah. Right. So we are subject to a triennial audit for FTA, and we have to show where the bus stops are located, the bus stop amenities, like where the shelters are, to make sure that they are proportionally located. There's not all on one side of the city. So that, but that's kind of more macro scale. But yeah, I mean, we do want to be sensitive, so the folks at Orinoco could, that the stop would be moving further away from them. I think the ridership we saw was about 12 to 15 per day, but they do have the stop 1 block further down. That's quite close as well.
So question, Martin, on the stop. So the existing stop on the westbound at Ladre, that's a block. I mean, that stop's going to be improved, but it's also a block where parking currently is not permitted. So that would probably in our inventory, I would imagine the inventory probably considers that to be an accessible stop even as it is.
Yes,
today.
true, yes.
And so it's going to be even better and have more room for people to wait and to sit. The stop though at Orinoco westbound that's being moved currently is probably not accessible because it at very least allows parking in front of it.
Correct.
Now, do we know if that's going to change with the relocation, or is that something that the city is going to pursue as part of that? Because if the Annie B. Rose residents are walking to that stop because it's a tour location, they probably also would benefit from being able to board a bus without having to step between cars and things like that, where the bus can pull up to the curb.
Yes, so the Orinoco stop today is not accessible, but the intent is that this new stop would be accessible, so there'd be 2 parking spaces that would need to be removed.
That's, I'm glad to hear that. And then just another comment, kind of in general, and also for kind of TNS's consideration. I got to hear I happened to turn on the council meeting because it was a really cold day after the snowstorm, and I'd come home from the farmer's market and said, well, what's better than the council? And actually, I turned on right at the time that council was deliberating over this, specifically on the transit stop. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a fascinating conversation. And it was, at least to my memory, probably the longest amount of time on a non-transportation project that council really got into looking at transit amenities. And I certainly heard you being called on by council members to respond to questions. I was glad Dash was there. There seemed to be some kind of almost negotiation or planning of that stop kind of occurring from the dais, as a couple of council members were kind of making suggestions about even things like, would we have a pole that people could kind of hold on to while they're standing, and would that benefit, or even talking about raising the curb. And so as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, I know we have kind of shelter designs, but it almost seems like, is there kind of a menu where you can say, okay, here's kind of a different types of bus stop amenities, and then here are things we can kind of add to it? Because council was even looking at, do we pull money, I think from the capital bike share contribution, even to improve the transit amenities? And it just seemed like if there was sort of something we could look at and just say, okay, here are things that we can do on a standard stop to make it accessible, and here are kind of the extra enhancements, say if we have a large population of people who have mobility issues. It would just seem to maybe be helpful to kind of have that, so then people could say, okay, this is what it would cost and this is where we can do it, and we can decide, do we prioritize that over this? Just seems like that might have helped that conversation along. So I don't know, Hillary, if you had a chance to listen to that meeting, or if you had thoughts on whether that's something that would be helpful to kind of have out there for the community and our elected officials to think about in doing stops.
I mean, I think, one, we have different contributions for different things, and we don't always want to negotiate against ourselves and trade off and say, let's take from capital bike share and give to transit. I think our planners work closely with Dash too, to look at when we're putting in a new stop, or when we have redevelopment, what do we want that to look like, and what should be there based on all of the things you noted, the ridership, the accessibility. So we tend to try and work with the developers to get as much as we can. I think, that's a benefit of the development that we have in the city, is that we're getting a lot of new infrastructure that otherwise we would have to fund. In terms of kind of what goes into that, we do have our, standard shelters that we've gone through contracts to make sure we're trying to be standard in the city. There's also, I think I updated you all on the TMP fund, that now money will be coming to the city for transportation management plans. Instead of the developers having to do things with that money themselves, we will have a pool of money to implement kind of additional upgrades. So, I think we try and get as much as we can get the developer to build, but they're also balancing things like affordable housing and all the different contributions. They do get a credit for capital infrastructure that they put in from their TMP plan. So the more they do, the bigger that credit is. But yeah, I mean, I think that's part of why we have this new TMP program, because if we need to go above and beyond, and there are things that they need to prioritize over other things, we have means to do that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I kind of felt like in that conversation, there were things that maybe were well-intentioned, but actually, if you think about practically, wouldn't have actually been helpful, or actually could have been hazardous potentially if those had been installed at bus stop. But sort of just looking at what's kind of the universe of things, so that way if you say we really want to make this a grade A bus stop, these are the things that we can put in there. It just didn't seem like maybe our elected officials kind of at the table maybe had access to all of that in terms of some of their decision making. I'm also very glad they didn't pull from the CAPI contribution, because I do think those things are important, but it looked like they really wanted to make this a great bus stop, and as it should be, because it is a very high ridership bus stop. Okay. I didn't know if you had anything further you want to say, but
No, and I mean, we have, I think that's what gets worked out on the staff level.
Okay.
And so I think staff does a really good job of trying to get the best amenities that we can. And why, it's nice to try and add things in last minute, but a lot of times staff has already gone through those and kind of figured out like what fits, what doesn't, what could work in that stop. And again, trying to get it as much as we can with the development in that one build construction is our goal.
Yeah. And I think just overall, I was very pleased that council pays attention to these things. And I think that overall is a very encouraging, especially for some of the goals that we have. So thank you. And thank you, Martin, for covering that. It does seem like a really good solution for the transit users at that location. So.
All right. So the last item we have, this is the big one. This is the presentation of our inaugural ATSP, our Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan. We talked about this back in November, December a little bit, but we've actually have the draft document now that we're presenting to the board. Just as a quick recap, this is the new DRPT required service plan that we will be updating each year with major updates every 5 years. I should, because I know we were talking briefly at the start of the meeting about the board strategic plan. So I do want to differentiate between the board strategic plan, which we're calling the BSP, is that we've decided on the BSP. And that does inform this document, but that is separate from the ATSP, which is the Alexandria Transit Strategic Plan. It gets much more into service programs, policy, that sort of thing. So, but this is the annual service plan document. This will replace the TDP that we're all familiar with from the last many years as our vehicle for service change processes for the following fiscal year and years after that. I do want to emphasize that it does include a lot of the same elements as the TDP. It is a lot more voluminous, I think, than even we realized it would be based on a lot of the requirements from DRPT. There's I think guidelines that DRPT produces that we use to kind of construct this document. So it does have a lot more information in it, but I think that's good from a transparency standpoint. There's a lot of good tables in there, and hopefully it's somewhat approachable. But I do want to emphasize there's no changes to board authority, as we talked about before. This is just a change in the vehicle through which the board makes these decisions. And the full document, before I get into some of the details, the full document is available in your packet. That's why your packet is 22 pages. It's also on the DASH website, dashbus.com/strategic plan. And then the memo that I included in the board packet is also kind of a 2-page summary of some of the highlights that I'll be talking about tonight. So a couple things that I want to specifically touch on, which are the biggest changes or the things that might be of interest to the board. The ATSP requires standards, that we have certain standards for the service design and system-wide performance, and we use those standards going forward to identify how our route is doing, how our routes are doing, how our system is doing, and then that provides one of the inputs for how we decide on our service changes to address some of those weaknesses or underserved areas. So the service design standards are part of that. These standards are very similar to what the board adopted back in 2022 for our Title VI program. They set standards for things like headways, peak passenger loads, on-time performance, and things like that. So largely, we're able to continue using those that we had in our Title VI program. I did make 2 adjustments based on kind of the guidance we've gotten from the board previously. First is that the vehicle headways for local routes. Previously, in the Title VI, we had those at 60 minutes for off-peak periods, off-peak midday, evenings, and weekends. Based on a lot of discussions we've had over the last couple of years, I figured that 30 minutes probably makes a lot more sense as the minimum standard that we're trying to achieve. And that's in line with a lot of the recommendations that we're making from the service side. And then the second thing is service availability. Previously, and this is the percentage of residents that are within a quarter mile of frequent service within the city. So currently our number is about 73% based on the new network. We had set it at 50% as the standard for the Title VI program, but through our board strategic plan, it's been discussed over the last couple of months, it was actually 70%. It's the number that we included in that. So I'm aligning this with the board strategic plan. So that's the change there. And obviously we're at 73% today in terms of the percentage that have access to that frequent service. We want that percentage to go up. So those are the service design standard changes. The system-wide performance standards, which is the larger table at the bottom of this slide, these are all new, but a lot of these are things that we've used previously. A lot of these standards. The new ones, I guess, are the ridership and efficiency. We have boardings per revenue hour, boardings per revenue mile, as well as cost per revenue mile, cost per rider. So we have standards there. that we've set, and those are based largely kind of, we were looking at the last 5 years or so of performance to kind of get a sense of where we've fallen and, where we stand on those. So I think those are subject to change as we move forward with this. We're going to be reevaluating this on a regular basis. You can see in I think it's chapter 2 of the document, there's a very detailed tables that show which routes are above these standards, which routes are below, so you can kind of get a sense of how we're doing and if those need to be adjusted at all. But the rest of the standards on here, the 85% on time, the 0.02% missed trips, those are kind of what we used for quite some time and it found to be pretty good. Next slide, please. So like I said, a lot of those, how we are performing against those standards informs the service changes. And the good news is that looking at what our areas of improvement are and what we've already kind of been thinking about for our service changes, they kind of line up. The areas that need improvement are also where we've proposed service improvements. And so for FY25, the first fiscal year of this plan, there are 3 service improvements that we've included. These are the 3 that we had talked about back in the fall: line 32, line 34, and line 31. So as we talked about back in the fall, our top priority for FY25 that is currently unfunded is line 32 improvement. This is the Eisenhower Avenue corridor. We're trying to increase line 32 service during off peaks, middays, evenings, and weekends. Currently, it runs every hour during those periods, which is well below what we're shooting for. So this improvement would increase that to every 30 minutes during those periods. Next slide. Line 34, again, this was something that we had tried to do last year, but we're not successful. This is a Sunday improvement on line 34. We would be doing moving from every 60 minutes to every 30 minutes on Sundays, providing better connectivity from Old Town to Potomac Yard. And then the third one is line 31. This is an improvement during off-peak periods where we extend trips that currently stop at King Street and don't go in Old Town. All trips during off-peaks would go into Old Town. So it would start at NBCC and end at Braddock Road, and that way you'd have better headways in the Old Town segment between King Street and Braddock Road. You'd be up to every 15 minutes during off-peak periods instead of every 30 as it is today. And that provides better connections between NBCC Alexandria, Bradley Shopping Center, Points West, and Old Town. So that's the third priority that we've identified. I have kind of a more detailed table here, which is also available in the ATSP itself. Keep going, provides our some of the analysis that we've done. And then just moving forward, FY26 and 27, these are some of the other improvements. These are not new improvements. These are things that we've listed in the past, but we want to continue to move forward with our ATV plans. I think the things that I do want to highlight, we talked about this briefly before, but the Better Bus Network. At this point, for purposes of this plan, we are assuming that would be an FY26 implementation for the year 1 network. Still, I think WMATA is still working through the details of that. And then for FY27 and beyond, a lot of the uncertainty with that will be fleshed out through the West End Transit Way operating plan, which is currently under development with the city. We've got some consultants on board that are helping us out. But there's going to be obviously the question of who's going to operate that service, what the service levels are going to be, and then the impact on adjacent routes, because that is still to be determined to some extent. So that is kind of a big question mark for FY27 and beyond. And then just highlighting a few other things that may be worth looking at for those that are interested. We've got the performance evaluation is in section 2, as well as a brief recap of the onboard survey report. Appendix C is the full onboard survey report, and I plan to come back to this group next month to present that report, kind of the findings from that survey, which was conducted in the fall. That was the one where we had people with tablets on board our buses. We got almost 3,000 responses. We have a really good picture of the rider profile by route, by day, etc. So we've got some good information there that's included in this. It's our CIP program, our draft program. Actually, I should say our FY24 approved program is currently in the document because the draft FY25 program has not yet been made public, but we will be inputting the FY25 draft CIP program as soon as that becomes available. And then we also, a change from the TDP, there is also a financial plan in section 5. Edward was very helpful in working on that. So we have that, and you can review some of the long-term plans for how we're going to implement and fund this going forward. So again, the full plan is available on that website, and we'll be pushing that out to the public in the coming days. Last 2 slides I have are timeline and outreach. So timeline, we're here in February with the draft document being presented. The public hearing will occur at the next meeting in March. Obviously, we'll have a discussion at both of those meetings. And then in April would be the potential adoption for the final plan, revised based on the feedback we receive. And then one new wrinkle is that after the board has adopted the final plan, we also have to, per DRPT requirements, have it adopted by the COG MPO body, which is, in this case, is the Transportation Planning Board from COG. So they'll just be able to approve it and incorporate it into their plans as well. And then also, while all that is happening, we're also be doing a lot of outreach. We don't have the exact details yet. We're still finalizing these plans in terms of meeting times, locations, dates. But we'll have several community meetings across the city, both in person and virtual. Rider engagement is going to be a big part of it, like we've done in the past. Pop-up events, ride-alongs. I'm going to have onboard announcements, onboard posters. Try and get out in front of the riders and make sure that they're aware of this. So they can provide feedback. We've got our typical digital outreach that we're doing, and then community groups. We are in the process of updating all of our. We've got 100+ community group contacts, so we're updating that list right now, and we're going to be reaching out to them in the coming weeks to make sure that they are able to distribute to their constituents and perhaps allow us to come and speak with them and get their feedback. So that's the rough outline of what the outreach is going to look like, but more info will come on that. I think that wraps it up. Happy to answer any questions or take any discussion.
Let me ask a clarifying question. So normally when we were on the TDP, we'd have a TDP and a budget hearing that would often have to come after we sort of knew where we were going to fall within the city. And often we were adopting it, I think sometimes as late as June, because we had to react to changes. So are we decoupling those now because we're going to have a hearing on this, which essentially is the new TDP in March? And what's the thought on the budget? I mean, we'll know what the manager has proposed, but we won't know any changes that are made. And likely, I mean, we submitted as supplementals, but I would expect that probably our service requests will probably not be funded in those, and that it's something that council would have to act on as they go through the budget. But that would then require us to make changes later on. And so we usually have our hearing quite a bit later.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think just based on the timing, we probably would have, we would have to have some contingency in the plan that, this is pending council adoption. Josh, do you have?
Yeah, this is obviously a different process for us. So I think we're going to need to potentially maybe have some conditional pieces to it if there are pieces that are still remaining uncertain at the time that the board takes action on it. So yeah, it's going to really kind of see how the budget process plays out and sort of what volatility there is related to that as to how we can align our timing. We actually, I think last year we were a month ahead of our normal schedule, getting everything approved, I believe last year, if I'm not mistaken. So we have some flexibility that we can move some of that stuff around if need be.
Okay. I thought we had ended up deferring because of the line 34 was still sort of up in the air, that we had ended up taking that up late.
You may have better memory than me
okay.
on
I
that.
I thought we ended up in June just because we took a month to consider feedback on that, but which didn't end up really changing largely what I think actually we did still approve it because it didn't really, whether the route was realigned on one street didn't really affect what we ended up doing. But I do recall we've had in the past some need to have that extra flexibility. Is the May date for the TPB at COG, is that when they're doing all the plans within or do we have to go, we're just going then because we think it'll be done here in April and
that's the timing we've assumed.
Okay.
There may be some flexibility on that.
Okay.
That's not locked in.
I just thought if in case we get some surprises that, we to build that in. And then I do think we probably have to do a separate budget hearing. Then we'd have to have 2 hearings unless we can feel confident that we can go in March.
Yeah, I think we probably need to think about that a little bit
That's
and parse it out a little bit better. I think we'll know more by the time we get to the March meeting for you all.
Mhm.
We can get some answers for you on that.
Okay. And then your public outreach how are you advertising that there's because our public hearing, it looks like, is coming at the beginning of this process in terms of your community outreach. Is that fair?
Or
maybe
it's
in the
a little
middle?
tricky because we're trying to work around the 40th anniversary and everything that's going on
Yeah,
with that. So I think there may be one meeting before the end of this month, but then I would think there'd be probably more meetings the week after the anniversary and the week after that, to kind of make sure we get all the input.
And then
before we
what are
vote.
you asking people to specifically, what parts of the plan are you thinking people will most want to talk about, or where you can kind of get useful feedback? I realize it's important to raise awareness that this plan is out there. It's a document that, will guide our system, but what do you want people to kind of talk to you about?
Yeah, I think mostly it's awareness. I think that's the biggest thing. It's just that this plan exists. We've got a lot of great data in here. You can learn more about the system and provide feedback overall. But I guess specifically the service changes are probably the most important thing. Certainly we can talk about standards if we want to adjust those, if people are interested in that. But I think it's really the service changes, how we prioritize though, if there's things that are missing that we should be identifying. I was thinking about hearing Bob's comments earlier, thinking about late night service. Are there opportunities where we need to add that as a priority so we have better frequency during those late night hours? And that's not something that's specifically called out here, but that's something that we could add if it's a priority.
Okay. Yeah, it's I guess just asking those kind of open-ended questions to people instead of saying, oh, you can read a 200-page plan on Dash's website. But I think also educating folks about how our funding structure works as well, because there may be people interested in particular advocating for particular supplementals, and then this is the time to be doing that with council. We're just explaining to them how we would have to get funding and what that amount would look like to do what we believe is needed for the community. So, yeah. Anybody else? Well, thank you guys for putting it together. I did note that we seem to have I haven't read the whole plan, but we did seem to have an outdated org chart. I saw John Lanoka listed as the maintenance director. So just if you could update that before it goes forward.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Is there any other business to come before the board? Our next meeting will be March 13th, and we do try to have our public hearings at City Hall. So since it's a public hearing, we'll plan to meet there. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Moved Jesse. Is there a second? Art? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Good night. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.